Hi, Reed. I wanted to get ahead of our meeting a little bit and record a bit about our agriculture strategy and a little bit about the department, but mostly just about the strategy. You see at the top there, we have in parentheses climate resilience, agriculture, and market systems. All of those have a history with our department. We've been known as CRAG, and I think we still are known as CRAG. Um, we should talk more about how climate resilience and agriculture overlap, but there's a major overlap between climate resilience and ag. So when we talk about climate resilience as a priority going forward, um, through this presentation, hopefully you'll appreciate that regenerative agriculture is a climate resilience activity. It both supports adaptation and mitigation of climate change and to climate change. So there's certainly a connection between the two there, and market systems is in my job title. We were looking at agricultural market systems, food systems. We're of course enterprise driven by nature as an organization, so we're enterprise focused. So market systems are obviously a clear part of this. So I put those as kind of assumed climate resilience, agriculture, and market systems all together as one. The kind of strategy, the approach we're taking is regenerative food systems. That's something we are using. It's not necessarily a major trending term right now. We'll talk about some of the trending terms as we go, but regenerative food systems should be a term that we can own. It's not too widespread. We can do a little research to see how many people are really using it, but it's kind of an IDE approach if we're bought in and say yes, regenerative food systems is the way we want to go. And we'll talk about what all that means in the slides to come. I'm just going to pause and make sure that this recording is working properly before I continue. But the objective before I do that, the objective of me recording this in advance is so that hopefully you can watch it before we meet, and then our meeting can kind of take the next steps forward. So we don't have to have a meeting where I'm doing a monologue, but rather I can record some of this. Hopefully, you have the chance to watch it in advance, and we can maybe use this as a practice going forward too, to record some of these items that I find myself discussing over and over. We can kind of do a primer on the topic, and hopefully use our time more efficiently as a result. So let me just check to make sure this is working, and I will be right back. Okay, I think we're good to go. Next slide. We talk about regenerative a lot. Let's dig into that a little bit. Let's unpack the buzzword. Um, so I think I make reference to Planetary Health Alliance partially because I know that Dana and the nutrition team are have expressed an interest in engaging the Planetary Health Alliance. It's really about human health, plant and planetary, the health of the planet, human health, all being connected with each other. So I'm just using that as a term here, but it really is it's overall resilience. We could call it a lot of things, but essentially a lot of things are degenerating in our societies, in our economies, in our um, environment together. So it's not about agriculture yet. It's not about any. It's saying that like things are not going great in a lot of ways right now in the world. And we really, as an ag department, we'd like to focus on a vision and where we want to go. So you usually won't hear much doom and gloom from us. So this is really the extent of it. Things are not going great, right? So why? Well, we're industrializing. There's certainly some downsides to um, economic development. There are the haves and the have-nots, and so on. There's an extractive approach. We're losing biodiversity. Water cycle is off balance. A lot of people and inequality. So, generally speaking, we can agree that there are some pretty downward trends that we're trying to correct. And again, we're not doom and gloom people, but this would be about it. So, where do we go from here? we can either maintain the status quo, or we'll keep kind of the downward spiral or sliding downward. We talk about sustainability a lot, and great, we need to use that term in context. Ultimately, a lot of what sustainability means is doing less bad, doing fewer bad things, or doing bad things to a lesser degree, which is great. We need to improve practices across the board. What regeneration specifically refers to is fixing damage that's been done, rebalancing systems into a way that's economically beneficial, socially beneficial, and environmentally beneficial. And there's some more nuance to that we'll go through here. A degenerative system, as we define it in our space, is technical systems design. We as humans want to control every element of every system we're managing, and that's what we've done with agriculture. We've turned it into on one hand, like a technical exercise where we control every element of the system. We've also turned it into an extractive industry. We've extracted the fertility from our soil. The story of the Great Plains is repeated all over the world in its own way, but the bison that kept the Great Plains a healthy grassland with they say there was 2-3 meters deep of soil fertility at the time that the bison roamed the plain, because they had a natural relationship with that soil. Everything was in balance. Everything was healthy. Then we found it as technical design people. So now we're getting a little bit into agriculture, but this mentality applies across the board: ecological, social, and economic systems. But we've taken technical systems design, applied it across the board everywhere we go. We quantify, and that's how we ended up kind of in a system that's has a lot of downsides that we're trying to address. So that's through a segregation of activities. Now, on the flip side, a regenerative system is a living system design. We recognize all of the roles played by living organisms across the board, big and small, everywhere. Um, economies are living systems. Ecology is a living system. Social systems are living systems. There are vacuums that get filled. There are functions that get filled. There are so essentially a regenerative system tries to ensure that the necessary functions are filled in a way where the balance is positive economically, positive socially, and positive environmentally. That's just basically what a regenerative system tries to do, looking at a whole system, not reductionist, but holistic. Those are the kind of, the mentality around it. So it's not meant to be too philosophical, but it's more about really having holding the meaning of what being regenerative is, holding that close to our hearts, and understanding what that means. But the buzzword is a bit of an issue. We'll go into that. So let's look at what it means. Segregation of activities in an industrialized system versus integration of activities. So if we can just start thinking, in these principles, we're going in the right direction. We don't divide up, we integrate. Specialization is obviously common in our technical systems. In the regenerative system, diversification is promoted. Again, this applies not just to agriculture, but across the board. Incomes, do business with a number of different suppliers. It's just a better system. You're more resilient. The system is more resilient because there's diversified sets of interactions among actors. Whereas a technical kind of industrial system focuses on maximizing volume, a regenerative system doesn't focus on just volume of two things, but it maximizes complementarities. Let's maximize how well we can synergize with each other. And then, so you may not have better volume, but you end up with higher quality, more nutritious variety of things rather than 100 million tons of soy. So So yeah, it's about really like complementary systems, which obviously gets a lot more qualitative, a lot more complex than just these, easily quantifiable reductionist ways of thinking on the left. Um, yeah, so the next one down is just about control. We want to control all the elements of the system, whereas on the right, I mentioned this before, we want to balance elements in the system. Next is centralized systems, centralized actors, centralized functions versus decentralized. A regenerative system is as decentralized as can be. Think of supply chain issues. The more decentralized you are, the less you have to worry about global supply chain issues. Um, the technical system design, industrial designs tend to be linear. That just means something is that you have an extraction, you have a production, you whatever sell, use, and then it's waste. Linear. Uh, Regenerative thinking should be circular economies, circular design, where we reduce, reuse, and recycle. Next is about, well, technical systems are complicated, and they're very complex too, I guess. But we usually say that living systems are more. We think about complexities rather than making it complicated. Um, so we can discuss through that. That's maybe more philosophical than the rest. And then finally, I like this one. It's a great example of that applies across the board. And in an industrialized system, you have few entities, oligopolies, monopolies are the most extreme examples, um, which is not healthy for the system. Whereas a regenerative system, you have many entities. Just think about, well, if you don't know already, there's more organisms in a teaspoon of healthy topsoil than there are human beings on the planet. So there's a lot of entities there, and there's a lot of transactions. There's a competition for survival of the fittest, and so there's um, nature. We say biomimicry. I can't believe I didn't put biomimicry in this slideshow. I think I did, and I removed it. But biomimicry is really a go-to philosophy. You think when you're thinking, should we do A, B, or C? Just think, does it mimic nature? Are we mimicking nature? Biomimicry. So if we're working in an economy where there are a few entities, is that really mimicking nature? What is the nature of the transactions? Are they extractive? Are they mutually beneficial? So, just kind of like looking at how nature operates as a guide to how we operate regenerative systems, design living systems. So, okay, it's a buzzword. We just talked about what it means. So hopefully now you appreciate it means something other than a buzzword. Um, Sustainable, we already talked about, it's not enough. Like we need to rebuild what's been lost. So what do we do now that we have this regenerative as a buzzword? Um, Climate smart was used for a while. It was co-opted by Monsanto and others that called their seeds climate smart. It's less specific than regenerative because of all that kind of long definition of regenerative we just gave. Because of that, I think that it was chosen as the next word because it means something very specific. It means all the stuff we just talked about. So what do we do? I think we just keep using regenerative. We can also use complementary words like agroecology, which is a more specific type of regenerative. It's more like regenerative ag if we're going to talk about agroecology. Circular, other types of terms that are kind of like all complementary and working in the same direction as anything that's regenerative. Again, it's just terminology, but these things come up a lot. They can create confusion. There are a lot of different words but anything that's kind of like trying to put the system in a good balance and mimic nature in the process is probably in line with regenerative thinking. Any of those those principles I talked about before: decentralization, many entities, and so on. So we're still not officially in the regen ag section yet. This is more just regeneration as a concept. We're trying to promote a paradigm shift, and in doing so, we kind of have to keep a few principles in mind. And they, when I was writing this, they all started with P, so I was pretty excited about that. So patience is the first one. Like, where paradigm shifts don't come overnight. We have to meet the system where it is and change gradually. And in line with that is about pragmatism. Like, the world in our mind is broken, but we can't get frustrated, and we just remain, kind of remain grounded in where we are today. Be patient and just kind of like build things one at a time. Stay positive. We always try to focus on vision and where we want to go. We don't really we don't harp on fears and problems as much. We just try to work with people in the direction they want to go. Packaging. How do we package regenerative ag? It could come across in a lot of different ways, especially in today's world of, can we say climate around USAID? We'll get into that after. But how do we package this? This is not climate project. It's as much as it's a business project. It's everything. It's a climate. There's benefits across the board, and we need to package it as kind of stacked benefits is one of the terms that people use. But how do we put this together and really package what a regenerative world to people when we're trying to contribute to a paradigm shift? So now we're going to get into the agriculture part. So now the difference between industrial and regenerative in concept. We talked about them. You can see on the right, regenerative ag incorporates trees, a number of species. You have all ground cover. This is what we usually call a fence line, probably, where you just have a neighbor who's using industrial ag, and plowing, and fertilizing chemicals, and the neighbor on the right, of course, using different practices, buffer strips with trees, and we'll get into other practices shortly. This will come as no surprise based on some of the previous slides, but essentially, regenerative ag shifts the paradigm. Instead of competing with nature, we partner with nature, we mimic nature. Instead of disturbing soil, we protect soil and build soil. It's kind of no-till, min-till, no-till are common terms. Cover crops you often hear about, and they're just planted to protect the soil and possibly feed the soil nitrogen, which some plants do. So it's basically free fertilizer. Monoculture, you're growing one thing, whereas in regenerative ag, we promote a diversity of things grown, even if it's two. We'll get into that more. And then again, reductionist views versus holistic views. So on the left near iDE's agriculture program aims to support the transition from industrial to regenerative ag. I did use Nano Banana built into the Google slide, the AI stuff. So this is one example of it. I tried not to overdo it, but it's kind of tempting. But regenerative ag is really, it's a lot of things. It's farm profitability, and you can also see a diversity of production on this. There's major climate finance opportunity here that we can talk about, maybe separate from this video, but carbon and water are going to keep their heads up quite a bit, as well as biodiversity on the lower right. You can also, there's a climate finance play as well for biodiversity. Similarly, it's all related. The corporate decarbonization can really help catalyze some of this change through climate finance. So all of this is really connected. The water resilience on the right is connected to the climate finance. You have major water benefits from regenerative practices. You're recharging groundwater. Water, there's less runoff, so you get less these algal blooms, for example, that are caused by agricultural runoff into surface water. You reduce that significantly, so it's both quality and quantity of groundwater that you're improving. Climate mitigation, you could talk about carbon drawdown. That's technically what mitigation means, but there's also an adaptation element to this. When we talk about climate, we usually split it into adaptation and mitigation. There's some other ways of doing it, but this does both. Regenerative ag helps people on the ground adapt to climate change, and through even just diversity alone is a great adaptation measure, diversity of production. and then so that's the adaptation side, but then the mitigation side, and then the mitigation side is carbon sequestration. So, and there's opportunity in that through carbon finance. It's complicated, yes, but plenty of discussion to be had on it. Next is the financial element at the farm level. Farmers are feeling the squeeze. I think this is an AI generated thing I don't love, but like this first one is really important. Is the input costs. Um, I mean, there's a trend in India of farmer suicide that's directly related to fertilizer costs. It's the type of inputs, the cost of the inputs that are used are damaging ecologically, economically, socially to farmers. Uh, so there's a drought. The climate change is a part of this, so that just makes everything all the more um, vulnerable. There just increases vulnerability of these already delicate um, household level economics in a farming household. Over time, soil health is reducing, so you kind of need more fertilizers. This is one of the things that regenerative ag will address. Um, and finally, like the farmers they don't need to focus on maximizing yield. They need to focus on maximizing their own resilience of themselves and their communities. So that means all those other things we talked about regenerate, many actors, many transactions, many, diversity of production, all those things. So bottom line, it's good for farmers. It's good for farmers, like farmer economics at a household level. So we can definitely unpack that more and talk more about how that works. On the consumer side, there's a lot of action. There are definitely corporate targets, and corporations are acting partially, so that people buy their products. So there's consumer pressure that's part of that. You also have more direct kind of like certification, traceability, labeling, branding, so that people know their items are regenerative. And even in Cambodia, we're working with a supermarket that charges a 15% premium on regenerative products. People that buying from iDE. So there's a lot of stuff happening already in iDE in this space. I just want to make a point here. The main point is on the left is that this year, 2026, that the current administration put $700 million into regenerative ag through USDA. So if there's any concern about regenerative ag implying something about climate change, there's no concern. Like regenerative ag, the current administration supports regenerative agriculture. So there's no political pushback in the space whatsoever. In fact, the opposite. We could talk about why the current administration doesn't want to talk about climate change. To me, it's more about we don't want to blame fossil fuels for climate change. So regenerative ag is great, actually. I mean, I don't have an issue with fossil fuel companies at all because we actually have some of the same objectives. We both want to prove that nature-based solutions are powerful and useful. Nature-based solution is a if you've not come across the term, is basically like land use to fight climate change, to mitigate climate change. So regenerative ag is a type of nature-based solution in the climate space. And if you're a fossil fuel company, that's the um, kind of intervention you want to see and you want to promote. You want to say, yeah, we don't need to stop drilling. We need to sink carbon in these natural assets, in these on land, agriculture, land, and other uses, forests, things like that. So that's a little bit of an aside, but just to say that policy is not against us. Like as long as we don't blame fossil fuel companies for causing climate change and try to get them to stop drilling, there's no policy issue in my mind. It's as I said, the USDA just invested $700 million in regenerative ag. So regenerative ag is on the positive side of everybody. There's nobody who's the only people who are against regenerative ag would be industrial agricultural, big ag, which again we don't focus on that kind of thing. That's they have some of their own terminology that they're interpreting and using, but we just kind of do our thing without getting too tied up in big ag. We try to keep an eye on what they're doing, but the big ag tends to have an incentive that's misaligned with regenerative ag. So other than that, I think everybody aligns with regenerative ag in the policy space. There's a big sector advocacy um, ecosystem developing. The Common Ground and Kiss the Ground ones, those are both movies on, I think, Netflix and Amazon. Um, they're they're good. They're a good overview and they're movies, so they're like kind of made for the general audiences. Then you have Regen House and Why Regenerative are both advocacy groups that you see in places like COP and New York Climate Week and so on. On the upper right, Regenerative Food System Investment. That's both Europe and the U.S. focused, North America focused, and there's definitely, just to say, there's emerging investment opportunities recognized in the regenerative food systems. That's where they use regenerative food systems. There we go. See, it's around, so we're not the first to use it. And then on the lower right, investing in regenerative agriculture and food. This is a podcast that's amazing. I mean, it's hours and hours and hours of pretty good listening. Some of it gets deeper than others, but it's there are 400 plus episodes of all about investing in regenerative agriculture and food. That's just to say, there's opportunity, there's advocacy, there's action in this space. Corporations are on board. Pepsi, who is transitioning to more regenerative supply chains. Same with General Mills, Unilever, Nestle. Coca-Cola specifically has a Africa Water Stewardship Initiative where they are trying to replenish all certain groundwater targets and key basins, like watersheds, basins, where their supply chains are working. That's typically in the water space. That's what you see corporations looking for, is they want to replenish groundwater in areas where their supply chain is located. Not just their own plants per se, but where they're buying their inputs from. So there's some geographical constraints around water related projects, but carbon you can do anywhere, of course. But yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason, like, we're working with Louis Dreyfus right now on this where we're trying to work with Louis Dreyfus on this large coffee project in Ethiopia and Kenya. That's a part of this trend of a major multinational making regenerative commitments, both to reduce their, I think they call it Scope 3 emissions, is their own supply chain emissions, or Scope 2 emissions. That's part of the carbon accounting stuff. But they're reducing their overall carbon footprint by going regenerative. So whether it's the right thing to do or whether they're doing it for I don't know, compliance reasons, I think it's mostly voluntary, but there could be more compliance in the future around regenerative value chains. Well, this one I didn't do any fun AI on, but just to say that there are investment opportunities. We can talk about carbon, water, these kind of ESG sustainability investors who are looking at water as part of their nature-based solution. I mentioned nature-based solutions before. There are my LinkedIn is just overflowing with kind of people investing in regenerative ag, but it's mostly in the U.S. and Europe. but there are trends and opportunities. Carbon, water, biodiversity are like the clear kind of payment for ecosystem services is what they call them. But then I think there's also other opportunities. We want to talk more about consumer packaged goods. I think that's a great opportunity for us to discuss. So great. That's the end of that section. Yeah, I guess I'll just go right in now to our approach. So based on, you saw what is regenerative, you saw Okay, how does that apply to agriculture? We talked about why some of the benefits and trends that support us going all in on regenerative ag. And now we're going to talk about how we do it. So if we want to use the term theory of change, we would say that our theory of change is that healthy ecosystems underpin agricultural production. That means soil, water, and biodiversity underpin healthy underpin agricultural production in a healthy system. And in an industrial system, it's not necessarily true. You just feed chemicals, synthetic fertilizers, and extractive water practices. But in a regenerative food system, it is the ecosystem that drives agricultural production. If we're not there today, we can aim to be there in the future. Once we have an agricultural system that is underpinned by a healthy ecosystem, that would feed the markets, which then will value ecosystem services in there, and monetarily and otherwise. So this kind of keeps the system going. So we have a break it down on what each of these three sections consist of in our mind. This is just to try to keep it simple at the beginning with the three parts of the wheel. So here we can go into the different parts and break it down. In a regenerative food system, the soil is covered. It is not tilled. We talked about this before. You use organic material to feed the soil. In an extractive system, soil is bare, you're tilling deeply, you're using synthetic fertilizers. In a regenerative system, your water erosion is controlled, whereas in an extractive system, there will be quite a lot of runoff and erosion. So runoff is captured in the soil in a regenerative system where it goes off into surface water and pollutes surface water sources. And in an extractive system, in a regenerative system, you minimize evaporation because you have a lot of plants and shade and cooler environment generally. Whereas in an extractive system, you end up with higher temperatures and like microclimates just because of the nature of the production. You end up with more bare soil, higher evaporation, higher temperatures. In a regenerative system, groundwater is replenished because it's reducing runoff and sending water back down into the aquifers. Whereas in an extractive system, you're extracting it, you're irrigating, deep well irrigation, which often runs off into the surface water and into the ocean. So you're depleting groundwater and you're not restoring it. So in an extractive system. From the biodiversity perspective, in a regenerative system, we are integrating animals, integrating plants, integrating trees with crops. It's about integration, whereas in an extractive system, you're segregating, which doesn't promote biodiversity because you're killing everything in the process or their habitat. Regenerative systems produce by diverse produce, whereas extractive systems tend to produce monocultures, one big field of one thing. Regenerative systems, as I said, mimic nature, so it's in natural systems, whereas extractive are more industrial systems. So that's kind of how I break down, how we break down ecosystems. If you want to if you're having a conversation with somebody who wants to talk more about ecosystems, there you go, soil, water, biodiversity, and you can talk about on those lines. If somebody's more high level in the conversation, they don't want to go to that level, fine, keep it an ecosystem. Next is agriculture. The way we break it down is inputs, and then your on-farm production. What are you doing? And then what are you doing afterwards? Your post-harvest. So you're drying, you're handling, you're processing. So in a regenerative system, on the input side, you have local seeds, organic fertilizer that feeds soil health over the long term. You have natural pest control. So that means you might have a certain plant that attracts predator to pests. You have biointensive planting. So that means a lot of things planted near each other that are different, and you mimic nature the way nature doesn't have, anyway, that's a type of input strategy. Your animal feed will be well, I don't know why I have animal feed here. There's no counter to it on the other side, so we'll skip that. Extractive systems, you have centralized seed systems as opposed to local seeds. You have synthetic fertilizer, which only feeds the plant, really, not the soil. It doesn't build the soil health. These things that end in side, pesticides are killing things, herbicides are killing plants. So we like a lot of bugs and insects. So we don't need to. We like a lot of insects. They can do good things in a system. Then some insects we don't like. So yeah, we try to keep a balance, which frankly sometimes um, you could have a pet an infestation of pests, and you might be tempted to use pesticides or yeah, pesticides in that case. If the weeds are out of control, you might use some herbicides, but then you try to blend in some regenerative practices in the process to wean yourself from an extractive system back to a regenerative natural system. From the production perspective, um, I mean, there's different types of practices that you would just really only compare with industrial agriculture. I guess that point has been made by now. Regenerative post harvest, just a couple of small examples, really. You post harvest, you would reuse organic waste because there's always going to be byproduct in a regenerative system. Whereas in an extractive system, that people will burn their crop residue. In a regenerative system, you would use maybe solar drying, for example, rather than freezing, which requires extraction and use of um, non-renewable energy, I guess, in that case. So that's just an example of what we mean by regenerative. So because this wheel could actually mean it could apply to many cases. It doesn't necessarily need to be regenerative. Any agricultural system will have inputs, production, and post harvest. So what makes it regenerative? That's the stuff in the table. Next slide is markets. What makes a regenerative market? Which is a really interesting thing to think about. Enterprises and in a regenerative market, like we're going to have to seek out and work with, and we already are working with regenerative enterprises. So what's a regenerative enterprise? They're grounded in a range of values: local, um, socially minded, economic, social, environmental returns, as opposed to a profit-driven enterprise with disregard to other things. Of course, there can be responsible business, and there can be enterprises at a local level that are extractive. So it's not to say that big business is necessarily bad, but a regenerative enterprise does have is grounded in values. Um, Market linkages in a regenerative system are decentralized. There's many actors. The actors are relatively small. Whereas in an extractive market, there are fewer buyers, which really shifts the power balance. So that's extractive, not regenerative. On the demand side, consumers are their demand is driven by nutritional value in a regenerative system, by ecological footprint, social justice, and other factors, of course, including price. Whereas in an extractive system, it tends to be more focused on price, shelf life over nutritional value, or health, taste over nutritional value, and volume. How many Cheetos can you sell? That's extractive. How many vegetables can you maybe trade with your neighbor would be regenerative. And trade maybe is a bad example because everything can be monetized in a regenerative system still. Don't worry. So yeah, this is just the full thing with all the 9 parts now. You've gone through all those 9 parts. So we should be able, at some point, we hope everybody is conversant in all the 9 parts of what we call a regenerative food system. The one I'm using now does have entrepreneurs at the center. So we've changed that and put entrepreneurs back at the center just to make it clear that they're driving every part of the system. Right. Oh, thanks for hanging in there. So based on all this kind of theory of change stuff, what are we doing? We broke it down into 3 approaches: strategic objectives, whatever you want to call it. One is, what are we doing on the farm? 2 is, are we working with regenerative business models? And then three is working on developing value chains. Um, do we have circles? We have circles. So yeah, I think we went over this last week, but like it's essentially on-farm production turns into all this green area in the circle. Enterprises, working with regenerative enterprises would be a whole strategic objective of its own. It's just such an important element of what we do. And then the value chain element includes your demand, your linkages, and some of your larger post-harvest once it gets off the farm. So that's what the kind of color coding is there. Pardon me. So we're going to get right into on-farm practices. There's a lot of different on-farm practices. This is where this is the fun part. This is where we can actually see now people farming. There's kitchen gardens, market gardens. I got to go through all of them, but different types of gardens, different types of integrated forestry, agroforestry, agricultural systems that include animals. Kitchen gardens are kind of like your basic, your closest to the home. We call it zone one in permaculture. It's mostly for nutrition and household consumption. There are ways to make kitchen gardens pop. If you use contour, if you double dig and put organic waste underneath that soil, that's why those raised beds are raised, is because there's quite a lot of work that went into making those raised beds. You dig down, you add whatever organic waste you can find from around, including the kitchen, and then you put the soil back on top of it. So you basically have like a hotbed of soil life underneath there, and you have very healthy, nutritious, nice food for home. You protect it, you manage it, and it's a great. It's. I want to use this in all the TLTN gardens, but there's just a lot to keep up with in few people. So this is one thing Mallory would do, is go and make sure every garden we work in looks like this. I'll tell you more about Mallory after, but that's yeah. I mean, this would be, if I had one thing I could do at the snap of a fingers, it would be, because we do so many kitchen gardens in so many countries. Every country we work in kitchen gardens. It's just so connected with our nutrition program, and it's a critical kind of like it's a basic need. It minimizes your costs, keeps more money in your pocket, and drives local markets by reducing people's food costs. And so there's so many benefits to kitchen gardens. If I could make one change overnight, it would be turning all of our kitchen gardens into kitchen gardens that look like this. Neither one of these are iDE kitchen gardens. There's a group of people who really have been making a lot of great manuals on this in the past few years. So this came from them. This isn't iDE's work. This is what we're calling a market garden. It's bigger than a kitchen garden, and it can be more business oriented. School gardens we talk about a bit. Frankly, like you're not going to grow enough in a school to feed the school. So it's more about learning and less on production. This is an AI generated picture, by the way. Sorry about that. We still have any good pictures, but in Cambodia we are doing a school garden, I think, and there's opportunity with Rockefeller Foundation through their regenerative school meals program that we've been pursuing. So I think this is a strategic place for us to be, especially around the convergence of nutrition and regenerative ag. This is an example of agroforestry. The one on the left is AI generated, just because I wanted to show like the contours. This is on contour, so you're managing your water. It's a kind of contoured hillside in this case. There's a variety of production. You can see chili and banana, and is there some papaya? I don't know what all of these are per se, but there's an integration. There are a lot of different. I think avocado are in here. There's probably 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 different varieties of plants in this system at least, and you're managing the water. And there's beehives to just enhance everything while producing honey. So this is an integrated agroforestry system. The one on the right is my farm in Uganda, which has been, not closely managed for years, and still it's some small adjustments have had big impact. Ollie cropping is kind of a take on the same concept. It's really just but for people who must do crop systems, and I understand that's still crucial for people to do. Just plant some trees on contour in between, and it makes a world of difference. It cools the environment, it stabilizes soil, and reduces wind, um, and produces the fruit the trees produce if you're planting fruit trees. Floating gardens is relevant in places like Bangladesh, Cambodia, Vietnam, anywhere, even some countries, some parts of Africa where we work. Just this very specific design, something we can also just keep in mind is out there. Circular poultry is something I'm really big on because we can do it everywhere that we work. There's two different kind of high protein feeds that are produced that use chicken excrement as their fodder. So the one on the upper right is a Zola. It's like kind of a swamp plant that's high great chicken feed. In the bag is chicken manure. So it's kind of feeding this water with just the right amount of chicken manure, not too much, to produce this Azola, which reproduces super fast. It's high protein. A lot of good things about that. And then in the middle bottom look like maggots. Those are black soldier fly larvae. Same story. They're fed on chicken poo, they're and other things, household waste and so on. And then they're fed as high protein animal feed, including two chickens. So this to me is in the direction of circular that we want to be producing eggs, and of course you can eat the chicken. So this is an IDE entrepreneur we're working with in Kenya. I just went, was chatting with the team, learned she was doing this, asked to go visit her, met her really quickly. This wasn't what we were doing as IDE. We were supporting her to grind maize for the chicken feed. But by finding gems like her, and like her model is beautiful. She also trains women around her because she recognizes it's good for her business. She can sell them feed. She can um, she can do bulk chickens and sell together with them. So she leads a women's group and trains people how to do more or less the same thing she does, and to raise chickens, mostly raising chickens. So wonderful model. We're working with so many people all over the world who have great models like this. So we just need to I need to do a better job of drawing them out and showcasing them, and then it's kind of seeing how we can connect dots from there. Um, let's not forget the fish. There's some opportunities in fisheries, and you can also do some kind of circular uh, aquaponics here. We showed like the fish manure in this case will go and provide nutrients to the vegetables. Silvopasture just means livestock and trees. So that's another kind of integration and a regenerative activity. And then regenerative grazing is just bunching, moving, and giving land the chance to restore. And you can certainly integrate livestock with farms. You just have to do it in the right way. They say it's not the cow, it's the how. Thanks for hanging in there. um, the next topic is on regenerative business models. So try to break it down a little bit more here by within the space of soil. If we're talking about, we go to our wheel, the 9 parts, the same 9 parts as before. Soil, water, biodiversity. In the space of soil, there are a number of enterprises. So the main point here is like this is where you could say the rubber hits the road. You need a lot of good enterprises out there that work with us to make these things happen. So in the space of soil, we've worked with vermicompost enterprises in Nepal and in Ethiopia, at least. Compost can be a business, good small business, organic fertilizer. Same with biochar, and biochar also is connected with carbon projects quite often now. Biodigester, so that's your biogas. It comes from manure. There's the off the byproduct of that is basically is organic manure, biodigester slurry. And then you can also do some soil carbon income, which again, big topic, lots to discuss there, but it's may or may not be worth it in different contexts. In the water space, um, well, we're known for drip irrigation. IDE is already known for drip irrigation. Solar powered is the direction people have been going. So I use that as an example of some enterprises that we support who are either installing, installing and upkeeping these systems, and or just a farmer who's using it for their own business. Either way, that would be a kind of water oriented enterprise. Water harvesting as a service, and this is water harvesting like essentially digging contour lines, like you saw. In Honduras, there's a gentleman who does basically farm design services to show people how to control water on their farm. So that's to me it's fantastic. It's a much needed service that a lot of people may not see the value in. So that would be where the market intervention would come from our perspective, is raising awareness in that case. I don't know why groundwater recharge is bold here, probably because I'm really big on it, but that's similar to a carbon project. You can do a groundwater project connected to a regenerative ag project. Some enterprises that support biodiversity include tree nurseries. I think that's a great example. If there's an enterprise in a landscape that's selling 100,000 trees, shrubs, other plants, and a variety of them, huge benefit for biodiversity. Beekeeping, apiaries, they're they're just great for everything around them. They just breathe life. They pollinate. So I mean they're a great enterprise because you can get honey and other products out of them. Mushroom farming we threw in there under biodiversity as an example. Promote the fungal systems that promote soil health. Although sometimes we do them separate. I think outdoor mushroom farming would be ideal. Some people are doing indoor mushroom farming, which doesn't necessarily have that same impact. Ecotourism is an example of an enterprise linked to biodiversity. Now we have enterprises linked to agriculture itself. So there's some overlap from different categories, but in the input category we have organic pest. I'm saying pest deterrent, not pesticide. You can use plants like neem and chili to chase away pests, insects. You can there we are currently working with there's an indigenous tree, I don't remember which country, that people are using for veterinary health inputs, using local seed banks and seed multiplication groups for inputs. The chicken feed I showed you a couple of slides ago, that's an input, that's animal feed. We're also working with fodder production for cattle and small ruminants in different countries. In Cambodia, we have a cocoa peat moss that we're selling as an input, basically fertilizer and soil amendment. Next is like, how do you consider an enterprise like on the farm? Farming as a business is basically what this is. So everything, like a farm itself, should be considered a business. So you can have other enterprises linked to that, like farm business advisors, so one of IDE's kind of calling cards. Farm design service could be a part of that or separate. In Cambodia, we're working with an app that digitally identifies pests and disease data. So that's kind of part of your production process. You're integrating other enterprises onto your own farm's production process. In the post-harvest space, enterprises can include, I like the fortified and blended flour example because it connects with our nutrition program. There's other appropriate technologies. There's solar dryers we're using in a number of countries that can be used for like chili, coffee, mango, and so on. PICS bags are basically like improved storage bags. The P is in PICS is for Purdue University. So it was developed at Purdue University. Grain silos, storage, anything post-harvest handling, storage, and transport and so on, processing. Getting into this point of consumer packaged goods, if we can retail brand, we'll get going into the market side soon, but if we that could be a great opportunity for impact investing, and I think that's something we agreed we would zoom into a little bit more in our next call. But things like solar drying, smoking meats, things like that, aggregation, bulking, marketing, packaging, all the post harvest stuff. Enterprises in markets, it gets a little bit meta in some ways, but can we make an enterprise that supports enterprises? So the incubation concept with She is super interesting. FBAs can also serve a role here. We've also worked with business development services as part of our service offerings in the past. Some of our project designs is to work with local BDS service providers as enterprises. And then, of course, impact investing itself is a way to make an enterprise out of this, make support other enterprises and make an enterprise. Linkages now. How are we connecting? Like how are we supporting an enterprise through linkages? So again, impact investing could be one. Specialized aggregation, branding and marketing, kind of like as a draw to catalyze linkages. Different types of markets. There might be like, maybe the local item that you could serve it and you can sell in national markets, or something that's you can even export. In Cambodia, we work with groups called farm gate collectors who play a crucial role in linkages. And there's also potential to access premium markets if we can do things like below, like certify. So finally, you have demand. It's not just consumers. Like, for example, schools, institutions are also on the demand side. So we're using demand more generally rather than saying consumers. So enterprises on the demand side, nutrition entrepreneurs, a great example that are building awareness and stimulating demand for nutritionally dense foods. There's also certifications. There's a lot of space, a lot of action in the certification space. We have Rainforest Alliance here as just an example of one that was specifically called out in the Louis Dreyfus proposal. So that's, in the coffee value chain, that might be a really strategic one for us to understand. In Cambodia, we have QR codes on melons that we work in the melon value chain with entrepreneurs. There's QR codes linked to a farmer profile that grew your melon. Isn't that amazing? It's traceability. That's in Cambodia. And then the Aeon supermarket in Cambodia pays a 15% premium for regeneratively raised. I'm not sure exactly what their criteria is, but they pay premium for responsible agriculture. So these are ways that you can make regenerative food systems attractive for enterprises and markets. And as iDE, that's a really crucial element for us. So we're almost there. You think you've got it tough listening to this. I hope you're listening. I've got to be talking the whole time. So yes, taking a drink of water. Finally, last strategic, whether we call it strategic objective or approach or whatever, value chain development. So we use MSD. We use MSD to diagnose the system, try to see what systematic barriers and gaps to address, where are the leverage points where we want to intervene, and then how we take action. What do we do? That's more or less a summary of MSD. There's a whole community of practice around this. We work in a lot of different value chains, ranging from staples to livestock to fruits and vegetables to specialty and high economic value. Don't need to go into all of them right now, but these are some of the value chains that we have, that we currently are working in just the 4 countries that I'm doing a deep dive on their strategy with. So there's quite a range, good opportunities, especially in this high value one. So like Ethiopia and Ghana, for example, coffee is relevant in at least 4 of our countries. So I think having a coffee strategy would probably be a good idea. especially, I mean, Louis Dreyfus would give us the opportunity to become leaders in coffee if it comes through. Honey and bee products, excellent, high value activity that also accelerates other agricultural systems, and it can be incorporated into any agricultural system. That's also Ethiopia is a kind of leader in that right now, but I think we can. So that's relevant in every country in the world. I think is honeybees. um, Cardamom, chili, black pepper, also collectively just we call spices, in Ethiopia as well. Um, and then all the ones on the right are mostly Ghana. And baskets, we could call it regenerative food and fiber systems because baskets are fiber. But agriculture, we usually would say food and fiber. But in this case, we've been calling it food system. And then finally, livestock, poultry, fisheries, small stock, and there's even some space for, well, animal feed, um, possibly some cattle too. But like these are all value chains. There's so many value chains. Um, I want to make this. I want to go through this more comprehensive mapping of value chains by country, so we have a pretty clear idea of which value chains we are working in each country, which value chains we want to work in, and which value chains are active that we don't work in. Just so we have a clear picture of which value chains are in which country, so we know our kind of opportunities. That's about it. I mean, there's more, but I just wanted to, before we have our call, hopefully you'll have the chance to watch this. I understand if you can't, it's a long video, but this took me an hour anyway. So for me to try to jam this into your head on our call would be, that would not give us the chance to have a dialogue. So I wanted to have this here available for you to watch at your convenience, if ideally either before the call, if not after, and you can also just go back and refer to it if you are so inspired. So I look forward to unpacking some opportunities. If you're still, really focused now, the thing I'd really like to talk about is how can we how can we unlock our own revenue through partnering with enterprises, like, through consumer packaged goods? Can we invest VC style in a dried mango business in Cambodia, for example, and three other countries, um, and other opportunities like that? So I think we can find ways that we have a aligned um, aligned incentives with the entrepreneurs we're serving by having a stake in their success. So we're looking forward to talking about all of that. And there's so much more to share. So I hope you found this useful and it wasn't too much. Looking forward to talking soon. Thanks.